In recent years, global supply chains have faced unprecedented challenges, from pandemic-induced disruptions to geopolitical uncertainties. These events have exposed vulnerabilities, prompting CEOs to prioritise logistics and supply chain resilience. As companies navigate this complex landscape, the need for robust strategies has never been more critical. How can leaders adapt to ensure their supply chains withstand future disruptions? I'm Georgie Frost, and this is the So What from BCG.
The gold standard is how you elevate yourself and you switch from discussing procurement just being a cost to discussing supply chain and becoming a solution that enables and unlocks a competitive advantage.
Today I'm talking to Camille Egloff, BCG's lead for Transport, Cities and Infrastructure for EMESA.
You see it discussed in a few specialized magazines, specialized media. It hardly makes it to the boardrooms. Actually, executive teams, they look at transport and logistics or supply chain more at large as a cost, but one of the many lines on their P&L. So it's not also a very big cost comparatively with others. So pre-COVID, this is where you are. Not really a topic of super focus for the leadership.
Camille, COVID caused, as we know, enormous disruptions. What does the world look like now? Has it gone back to normal?
A few things have come back to normal. The freight rates. There was this inflation, and then, of course, we came back to a more normal cycle. You can also think about congestion and transit time. But at the same time, I would say that a number of things have been changed and will remain changed for the future, because you have, for example, a redesign of the supply chain. When you think about trying to de-risk a supply chain, many of the CEOs, they thought, okay, I'm going to bring part of my ecosystem closer to my consumption regions, and I'm going to try and de-risk so that I do not depend too much on just one single region of production, or a region of production that may be too much exposed to geopolitical risk, maybe too much exposed to tariffs. So there can be many different reasons, but I think that the sheer design of the supply chains have evolved, and this is, I think, something that is here to stay, and notably nearshoring. I think the other element that is probably here to stay is that if you are a supply chain executive, you want to track things. You don't want to be surprised anymore. You want to make sure that you have full visibility. If you are a logistic operator, you need to provide that to your customers, and customers demand that. And then I think last, I would say there is a notion of how do you balance between optimizing your cost and mitigating your risk. The notion of risk has really increased, and I think this is also something that I see CEOs and transport companies being obsessed about. It's that good balance between, yes, I want to control my cost, but not at the expense of taking too much risk on my supply chain.
I want to talk about that a bit more, about what leaders are talking to you about. What do they want to know? What are they most concerned about?
My clients in the domain of transportation and logistics, they need to understand what's going on. They need to understand the geopolitical risk, what's the status of it, what's the scenario, but also the evolution of the tariffs. And what I oftentimes come up with is that as a company, as a CEO, as a board, you need to develop the muscle of looking into scenarios. You cannot just think that the good old world is going to continue the same. You need to be prepared so that when things start to happen, when a congestion, a crisis, a new tariff happens, you're prepared. And for that, you need to have your scenarios, and you need to have the ability to read through that.
How prepared do you think the majority of businesses are in terms of resilience and thinking about supply chains?
The ones that are thinking how to equip themselves, that have a good view on impact of geopolitics on their own operations, they are there to win in the market and create competitive advantage. they have also been the companies more prompt to embrace evolution into providing answers and solutions for their customers. It's not the majority. It's a bit of an 80-20. You have those companies that have embraced this kind of evolution earlier on, that have accelerated. I see them today more prepared, more advanced, and creating a gap in the market. And then you have other players, a bit more attentist in the beginning, a wait-and-see kind of attitude. The gap between the two archetypes is deepening, and therefore the wait-and-see attitude is not going to take you very far. So you need to be on your toes to embrace also the solutions, including in digital, that you can find out there and develop for yourself, by the way.
How can you create competitive advantage in this space when it's not just COVID, it's big geopolitical tensions, tariffs, all sorts of things going on, and who knows what's around the corner? How do you manage that?
First of all, I think this is the new normal, I would say. And creating that muscle, being able to adjust, to adapt, is a sheer competitive advantage today. If I think of my clients in sea transport, for example, being able to quickly reposition your vessels, being able to quickly respond to a congestion on the west coast of the US and thinking, okay, what are my solutions to reposition the cargo, use more intermodal kind of transport and so on. This is a muscle that in itself can be a competitive advantage. That's number one. I think number two is while you're firefighting as a CEO, you need to always take that step back and think, how do I create the competitive advantage for the longer term? Very often I see that in questions around decarbonization, which is, I think, also a very macro trend and here to stay. Yeah? Addressing congestion today, being able to transport my cargo most effectively is probably the firefighting that I need today. But if that comes at the expense of not planning for the future, which is I need to support my customers decarbonizing their Scope 3 emissions and their supply chains, 5 years down the road, you're just going to be behind. Choices need to be made now when it comes to type of fuel that you select, when you select the fleet in which you invest, because those are decisions that are going to position the company for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And therefore, you can't have the luxury to just postpone these kind of things.
What does the gold standard look like in terms of approaching logistics? And you said right at the start that before COVID, logistics and transport was sort of secondary. It wasn't a main priority. I assume you think that we will not go back to that stage, that this is now a priority. So what does the gold standard for a priority look like?
So we talked about digital, we talked about green, but I think the one thing we haven't talked so much about, and this is really top of mind, is being customer-centric. And in an industry that a few years back could still come across as a commoditized industry, and to a certain extent, if you're an operator, you could think this is still quite commoditized and so on. Well, I think putting the customer at the center and really trying to understand what kind of solutions, how can you partner together, allows you, whether you are a freight forwarder or you are a transport operator, this allows you basically to go out of just a transactional relationship and go into something that is more sticky, go into something where instead of just discussing procurement and lower rates, you can go into discussions that include de-risking their supply chain, and therefore you put the dialogue at a completely different level. You become a lever of creating competitive advantage on their supply chain. So the gold standard is probably how you elevate yourself and you switch from discussing procurement and just being a cost to discussing supply chain and becoming a solution that enables and unlock a competitive advantage.
You said about being customer-centric. What does that actually look like? How do you keep the customer at the centre?
So, of course, I mean, in transport logistics, the customer, first of all, this is B2B. So the customer is going to be either a shipper, so a cargo owner, a big retailer, a big pharma company, a big industrial player like an automotive player. So that can be your customer, or your customer can also be a large freight forwarder. So you need to be able to put at the center, first of all, customers that look very different, but it's super important to understand how you're going to understand what is top of mind for them. Try to think, how do I become someone with which it's easy to do business with? This ability to both on the product side propose a solution that really makes sense at a price, at a cost that is going to be competitive, but price that should not be the only thing you discuss about. And then really thinking longer term, trying to build a relationship that, your clients know that they can count on you at the next congestion or where there is a crunch in terms of capacity, availability in the market. The customer will know that, hey, I can count on you, right? That translates into a certain stickiness, but also a certain win-win in terms of rates and in terms of service quality.
Are there any exciting digital solutions that you're seeing at the moment that you think, yeah, this could really move the needle, as it were?
Absolutely. And it's not like, the world of transport has embraced digital at the very, very beginning. This is an industry that sometimes moves at its own pace. But for sure, I see a lot of solutions today that I get really excited about. Airlines today are probably the most advanced when it comes to leveraging digital in improving their operations. And I get very excited because this is basically leveraging the wealth of data that we know exists in the world of transport, but proactively developing solutions that will make the life of an airline passenger easier. I mean, Georgie, you would have experienced these days that, when you are delayed and your flight is delayed and you are going to miss your connection, the old days of I arrive at Schiphol Airport and it's chaos and nothing works and I don't know what my connection looks like, then today it's different. You arrive at Schiphol on your app. You already have a welcome message that sometimes even say, cool down, it's okay, we have a solution for you. And then it actually tells you, look, we have already rebooked you on that flight, but there is also another solution if you prefer it. And this is not magic, but this is definitely powered by a digital solution that has been able to crunch millions and millions of data to be able to come up with this. And I think, I took the example that our flight connections, but I could take the same example when it comes to maintenance and repair for aircrafts, or when it comes to deploying the right crews on a vessel in shipping. So, solutions that we're seeing and that I'm seeing my clients develop and deploy always more with a lot of appetite, some good investment and some good ambition.
So digital is obviously going to be one trend. While not new, there'll be certainly some new innovations in the way that companies use those. What other trends do you think will shape this space going forward? And importantly, how do leaders navigate those changes and make the most of it, create advantage?
One thing is clearly decarbonized transport or green transport. There is no way we can talk about how transport evolves in the next 5-10 years without clearly putting green at the center, making sure that we bring solution to a decarbonized transport is at the heart of the strategy of every single one of my clients. Questions that come up are around what kind of fuel do I need to believe in, because there are different fuel solutions and you need to make choices. Then it's also about making the right decisions in terms of equipment. And also I always tell to my clients, this is not a fight you can win alone. So it's a lot about collaborating across the ecosystem, building coalitions between energy companies that produce the fuels of the future, between the transport operations and then the customers and the shippers. And if you find the right partners, then together you can share costs, because it's not like all of a sudden transport companies are going to bear all the premium themselves. It's just impossible. I can think about the recent partnership that the transportation shipping player CMA CGM has just inked a partnership together with Suez on the energy of the future. I think this is a typical example of building that ecosystem and finding allies so that you can bring various expertise around the table. And, CEOs, they want to make sure that they crack that together. So that, I would say, is the mega trend on green. I think the other one takes us back also to building the muscle of flexibility and adaptability in a world that is changing fast, but where also I think it's not like here is a crisis, when will the crisis be over? I think our reality and the new norm is that we live in a world of disruption. Today it's a geopolitical crisis, tomorrow it's a health crisis, the next day it's about tariffs and protectionism. What I discuss with my clients is how they can build internally, but also together with us oftentimes, how they can build the muscle to train basically their management, their talents, and bring talents on board that will be able to understand the world in which the company operates. So, for example, I see more and more of my clients bringing people that have talent in international relationships, that are ex-ambassadors, or that are, able to decipher geopolitical crises and how to understand what it's going to mean for supply chains or for global trade. I can't think of a single client who doesn't ask me at least 2-3 times a year to come and speak to the executive committee just to share, not the one vision of the truth. I would never think that, we hold the truth, but at least share our views on scenarios, share our views on also what they should be getting prepared for.
Camille, thank you so much. An absolute pleasure. And thank you for listening. We'd love to know your thoughts. To get in contact, leave us a message at thesowhat@bcg.com. And if you like this podcast, why not hit subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us. It helps other people find us too.